On today's show, who are the most notable absent prospects at the World Juniors, and which 2023 NHL Draft eligibles at this tournament have the highest potential to drive their stock through the roof? All that and much more on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, I break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakesh. I'm a scout and prospect analyst across multiple platforms, including this one. And I've got a great show for you today, centered around the World Juniors again as they come closer and closer to the first games of the tournament. I just want to sort of break down a couple subjects that I thought would be interesting to sort of look at as the tournament rolls on. So first and foremost, I wanted to look at the most notable absent prospects from the World Juniors. So prospects who were eligible for the tournament but weren't able to make it for a multitude of reasons. I'll make my way through the list. There's a couple players on Sweden, one on Slovakia that has a pretty interesting case about him, a couple on Team Canada, that kind of thing. So we'll look at all of them. And then we're going to look at some mailbag questions in our second segment, questions that were sent in by listeners of the show. And there were some pretty interesting questions regarding the World Junior Championships. I wanted to break those down with you as well. And then finally, we'll look at the 2023 NHL Draft eligibles who have the highest potential to drive their stock through the roof at this tournament. Prospects who are eligible for this upcoming draft, but either have flown under the radar or haven't gotten the recognition that they have, and who might be able to get that recognition through their performances at this tournament. But before getting to any of that, just remember to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. It takes a second of your time. It's always very much appreciated. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. Now, to get into our first segment, I wanted to break down the most notable absent prospects from the World Junior Championship. Now, I'm going to start over in Sweden. There are two defensemen that are absent from this tournament that I think would have been great additions, and both are absent for wildly different reasons in each case. So we'll start with Simon Edvinsson, the sixth overall pick in the 2021 NHL draft by the Detroit Red Wings. He's a left-handed defenseman, 6'4", 200 plus pounds. He's got size and strength. But he rejected Sweden's invitation to the World Junior Championship, which you don't see a lot. I'm presuming that is to continue his development in the AHL, and sort of grow his game in the North American style rather than go over to the World Juniors and dominate his age group. Now, he started the season with 8 points in 8 games played for the Grand Rapids Griffins in the AHL. That production hasn't really hung on as much as of late. He's only got 1 point in his last 10 games for the Griffins. So I would argue that he could use the confidence of playing first line minutes, first pair of minutes for Sweden and dominating his age group. I think that would benefit his confidence and his abilities after going through a slump of a point in his last 10 games. He's the type of guy who's got great defensive instincts. He's got some good hands. He can support the rush really well, and he always keeps a clear idea of his surroundings, but he still struggles with consistently making good decisions with the puck on breakouts. And when you're playing in a run and gun sort of tournament like you see in the World Juniors often, you're going to have a lot of breakouts. So that's a lot of opportunities, a lot of reps that he can get in order to improve that side of his game. But unfortunately, he rejected the invitation to the World Juniors and is sticking with the Grand Rapids Griffins in the AHL. The second defenseman from Team Sweden that is absent from this tournament, who would probably be a first pair defender along with Edmondson, would be Elias Salomonsson. He's a right-handed defenseman. He's got some size about him. Now, it's kind of an unfortunate situation in this case. He got hit pretty hard in the SHL along the boards and wasn't able to get back up on his own. He had some trouble with his balance, so we're guessing it's a concussion in his case, but there's no way to really say. All we know is he hasn't played since that moment, since that hit in the SHL. So he's injured and missing out on this tournament as a result. And he was the 55th overall pick in the 2022 NHL draft by the Winnipeg Jets. He's a pretty decent prospect, 6'1", 183 pounds. He's great at moving the puck. He's got a very, very great skating stride. It's a plus skating stride. He uses it very well to move around the ice, and his forearm ability is really, really interesting. But unfortunately, he'll be missing out on this tournament as a result of his injury. Then we move on to Slovakia. Now, the only Slovak prospect on this list is Andrei Molnar, and he's a very, very interesting case. He's a 2023 NHL draft eligible. He's going to be eligible for this upcoming draft. He's going to be, he was in my discussion in terms of honorable mentions for the first round. Now, it's a very weird situation in his case. So he's missing the World Junior Championships because his team in Slovakia, HK Nitra, in the Slovak top league, was playing a floorball tournament. Again, a floorball tournament. And someone roughed up his teammate Adam Sikora, who's a New York Rangers prospect, and a brawl ensued as a result of that. And within that brawl, Molnar broke an opponent's jaw during the fight, and now he's facing criminal charges. So I don't know how he managed this, but he managed to get a transfer to the OHL. So he's playing with the Erie Otters. He got an assist in his first game in the OHL. And in Slovakia, at the top level of pro hockey in Slovakia, he had 2 goals, 3 assists, and 5 points in 22 games. So he's going to be absent as a result of that. He's not going to be part of the lineup for Team Slovakia. Another prospect for Team Slovakia who isn't present at this tournament is Juraj Slavkovsky of the Montreal Canadiens, who was the first overall pick in this last draft. Now, with him, it's very simple. He's just staying in Montreal to further his development. Right now, he's got a great opportunity with the Canadiens to grab some ice time that he wouldn't usually as a result of injuries and poor performances from their wingers. Um, he started slotting in on the first power play for Montreal, and it's done a pretty good job of it. Now the Habs have a very, very bad power play, and he's not getting as many puck touches as he could because the team is barely able to set up in the offensive zone to start with. But um, it's a very interesting situation that he's in Montreal, and he keeps learning every game. That's one thing I've noticed a lot in this game recently. He's scanning a lot more. He's using his playmaking really well. He's getting more comfortable on the backhand. A lot of small things are trending in the right direction for Slavkovsky, and that's really promising for a player who is 18 years old and has a lot of room to grow his game. And especially the scanning thing was a big concern of mine heading into his draft. Just the fact that he wasn't really able to consistently show scanning habits that translate to the pro level, that are things that you kind of need when you play in the NHL, because you need to know what you're doing before you get the puck. You don't have the time to figure out what you want to do after getting the puck. So that change in his habits has been very promising, and it's been really interesting to see him sort of develop that part of his game. So he's in a great spot right now in Montreal, and I don't blame him at all for staying in Montreal. I think the Habs were mainly the one who made that decision, but there's no confirmation of whether it was Montreal making that decision or Slavkovsky, but I'm sure it was mutual. It's not a situation where he pulled the Simon Edmondson and rejected the invitation of his country. Then we go to Canada. Um, you've probably forgotten that this player is still eligible, but Cole Sillinger is absent from this tournament. He was the 12th overall pick in the 2021 NHL draft by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Despite being a sophomore in the NHL, he's still 19, so he's still eligible for the World Junior Championship. Now, I'm kind of surprised that Columbus didn't free him up to go to the World Juniors and represent Canada. He's been struggling to produce consistently this year with the Blue Jackets. He's got 5 points in 28 games for Columbus. I mean, I thought he would probably be better off, regaining his confidence by going and just dominating the World Junior Championship and helping Canada win gold. But I'm guessing that Columbus thought otherwise. Then after Sillinger, we've got Carson Lambos, the 26th overall pick by the Minnesota Wild in 2021. He got cut by Team Canada in favor of Tyson Hines, who's a third round pick of the Anaheim Ducks. That was pretty shocking to me, honestly. I did not expect Lambos to get cut before Tyson Hines. I really expected Hines to sort of be the first cut of that team, but he made the final roster. Lambos for me just looked like a surefire top four defenseman in this draft. Just looked like a surefire top four defenseman for Team Canada in this tournament. He's the captain of the Winnipeg Ice. He's got 21 points in 23 games. In the WHL right now, he's looked great, especially against forwards in the offensive zone. Playing from the blue line, he's been really good. It's just a weird decision for me. But I can't really fault Canada for weird decisions. They make them every year, so it's kind of to be expected at this point. And then finally, Owen Beck, the 33rd overall pick by the Montreal Canadiens in 2022, is another player who is sort of a notable absence from this tournament. He was also cut by Canada in favor of players that have been less impressive this year, like Kidden Bankier and Colton Dock. Beck to me is arguably the best two-way center in the OHL. And in his first game back for for the Mississauga Steelheads, yes, it was a 7-3 loss, but he earned 3 assists on all three of his team's goals. And all of those came before the halfway mark of the game against North Bay. So he was really impressive on his first game in return. So he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's heading back to the OHL with something to prove. And it's been really interesting to see him go about it. That's it for our first segment. Now we're going to go into our second segment where I break down some mailbag questions by our listeners. We're going to get right to it right after these messages. So let me paint a picture for you. You're hanging out with your friends, you're watching the World Junior Championship, having a blast. You're putting back a couple of drinks, and as the evening goes on, a few drinks become too many, and then you think of calling for a ride. But you live nearby, you can make it home okay. It's not that big of a deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everybody knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads. It's to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. If it only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever, drive sober or get pulled over. All right, so we're back with Locked On NHL Prospects. Now it's time to answer some mailbag questions from some of our listeners. I've got 3 questions here that were sent in by some of our listeners that are pretty interesting. They're related to the World Junior Championship, so very topical. Let's get right into it. One of our most avid listeners, Casey Lee. Hi, Casey. Hope you're listening to this episode. So he asks, what is your ideal gold medal game, and who are the 5 players that you cannot wait to watch at this World Junior Championship? So for the first part of that question, I think it goes without saying that a gold medal game of Canada versus USA would be absolutely fantastic. That's the classic. Those two countries are usually the best at this tournament, and just seeing them battling it out for another iteration of that classic sort of face off in the gold medal game would be absolutely amazing. But also, I'd love to see Leo Carlson and Axel Sandin Palika, two 2023 draft eligibles, perform on the biggest stage in junior hockey. I think Canada versus Sweden would be a close second to Canada USA in this tournament. Now, for the second part of that question, I wanted to break down 5 names of players I can't wait to watch in this tournament. Now, I could go for the obvious and go for Connor Bedard, Shane Wright, Adam Fantilli for Canada, but for Team Canada specifically, I've chosen Logan Stankoven, 46th overall pick in the 2021 NHL Draft by the Dallas Stars. Stankoven is one of my favorite prospects across any team. The style that he plays, the way that he plays the game, just the intensity and skill that he brings to the game on a regular basis. I was talking about him recently on Twitter, and someone mentioned that he's the type of player that the average fan can watch a game of the Kamloops Blazers and come out of it knowing that Logan Stankoven is the best player on the ice. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. He's got the style of play that's very obvious to see that, he is an exceptionally good player. But when you look at the details, when you look at the specifics on top of that, and you see the way that he moves off the puck, the way that he battles off defenders that are twice his size, his ability to find space between checks to, battle the net front, clear his stick, make sure it's open for shots and passes and stuff like that. I mean, there are so many layers to Logan Stankoven's game, which make him such an interesting player. Um, I'm a huge fan of those shorter prospects who have a lot of intensity and relentlessness about them, who battle through checks, crash their way to the net, and just play bigger than they are. And that's definitely Logan Stankoven. So I'm really excited to see him in this tournament, especially since this is his last year of eligibility for the World Juniors, his last chance to make a splash and really, excite the Dallas Stars fan base even further than he has already. That's for Canada. If you look at Sweden, I think my favorite prospect on their side would be Leo Carlson. Leo Carlson is if in any other draft year, he'd go first overall. You pin him against the 2022 draft eligibles, he's going first overall, no doubt. But in this 2023 draft, I currently have him at 4th overall, and that just speaks to the amount of talent at the top end of this draft. I mean, Carlson is outstanding. He can do everything that you want from a center. He's got size, he's got speed, he's got strength, beautiful, amazing hands. The way he moves, between checks, the way that he finds space off the puck, the way that he's able to shrug off SHL defenders already at such a young age. I mean, there's so much to love about his game that I can't not mention him when I'm talking about prospects. I'm excited to watch at the World Juniors. I'm really excited to see how he does against players of his age or group, or at least a year or two older than he is. He's already excelling against men in Sweden, so it'll be very interesting to see him for Sweden in this tournament. He's probably going to be manning that top line for them. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. He's got the skill, he's got the abilities to do it. So just a very impressive player to watch in Sweden this year in the SHL against men. So I can only imagine what he can do against junior players this year. Then for USA, I wanted to go for Logan Cooley. Cooley for me is the type of prospect who can eat this tournament up. The amount of pace and skill that he plays with, the shiftiness and creativity that he has, I'm willing to put money on it right now. He's going to score at least one Michigan in this tournament, and I don't say that lightly. The Michigan is a very difficult move to pull off, but I think that Logan Cooley's, at least going to try it a couple times and almost definitely going to score on one of them. So, if anyone wants to take me up on that bet, just let me know. The comments are right there. So, yeah, no, I'm very excited to see Logan Cooley. Just flashy amount of creativity and shiftiness and speed and skill that he has. This is the best tournament to showcase all of that. Then for Slovakia, I've got two of them to round out the five players that I'm really excited to see. So I've got Simon Nemec, the New Jersey Devils second overall pick in the 2022 NHL draft. He's the type of defenseman that I've always been a fan of. I love the intelligence that he displays, and I just want to see, how he takes his game from the pro ranks and the international pro ranks, having played in the Olympics, having played at the men's worlds, and just how he takes that sort of experience and applies it to his World Juniors campaign this year. It's going to be very interesting to see him sort of go about it. And he's almost definitely going to be the top defender on that Slovak team. And on top of that, he might just be a top three defender in this tournament overall. So he's going to be really exciting to watch. And then finally, I want to see how Dalibor Dvorsky does in this tournament because right now he's playing against men in the Swedish second division and not doing too well, in my opinion. There's some decision making issues, some processing issues. He's having trouble sort of using his body well to fend off checks. He's always been sort of bigger and heavier than players of his age. So I think the transition to pro has been kind of weird for him, but I want to see how he does in this tournament to see if he's able to keep up with his age group and if that's going to be able to scale up as he climbs the pro ranks. And I also want to see how he heads out of this tournament, the confidence that he has heading out of this and going back to the Swedish second division, and see if he's able to dominate because he was amazing in last year's tournament. He was one of the best, if not the best, Slovak players on a Slovak team, which had Slavkovsky and Meshar and Nemec. So it's going to be really interesting to see those players go about it. Then Alex Wesley Menard asks, "What are your predictions for offensive and defensive MVPs and your team of top five players?" So to make it quick, offensive MVP Connor Bedard, easy. He's not just the best player in this 2023 class; he's the best player in this tournament. If Canada somehow doesn't make it to the finals, I think that's going to skew the direction of voting, and maybe Leo Carlson or Logan Cooley get the MVP instead of Bedard. But Bedard's straight up the best forward in this tournament and just the best player overall. For defensive MVPs, I think I would go for Olin Zellweger. He's already too good for this tournament. He's got NHL skills. He just wasn't retained by Anaheim for whichever reason. I think he's going to rack up points in this tournament like nobody's business, especially if he's paired on the power play as a top power play quarterback with the Bedards and Wrights and all that. So other than him, I'd bet on Luke Hughes, who's a close second. Hughes might be the best, prospect, the best defense prospect in this tournament. I think that Zellweger gets it for points production and playing on Team Canada on their top line probably. The other name I throw in there is Simon Nemec, but he's a good notch under Hughes and Zellweger in my opinion. Then I'm guessing you're referring to an all-star team when you're saying your team of top five players. So I'm gonna do an all-star team including a goaltender, so six players. So on forward, I've got Leo Carlson, Connor Bedard, and Shane Wright as the all-stars at forward. Then on defense, Olin Zellweger and Luke Hughes. And then in goal, I'm going to go for an outlier, sort of a wild card. And Caden Mbarico. I think that Team USA is going to have really good defending and that their goaltending is going to reflect that. And I think Mbarico heads out of this as the top goaltender of this tournament. And then JD Young, the host of Locked On Sharks, a good friend of mine, asks, "Who's the starting goalie for Team Canada?" Now, this is a tough question because there's two goalies in this, in this roster. They didn't bring a third string, to this tournament. So they've got Benjamin Gaudreau, third round pick in 2021 of the San Jose Sharks, JD Young, San Jose Sharks. That's why he's asking. And the other prospect that they brought in was Thomas Milic, who is a twice undrafted goaltender whose draft year was the same year as Gaudreau, but he went undrafted twice. He's a 2003 born netminder who's still eligible for the 2023 draft. It's tight between those two, but I really like Gaudreau's chances. He's played for Canada before, the U18s and U17s, and has played more games than Thomas Milic in those tournaments. But his OHL numbers with Sarnia in the OHL have kind of been unimpressive. He's got a 3.67 goals against average and an 8.68 save percentage so far for the Sarnia Sting. And on top of that, he's gotten pulled a couple times for poor performances, so it's difficult to assess if he's going to be able to maintain that top string goaltending role that he had throughout the U18s and U17s ahead of Milic. And meanwhile, Milic also has that U18 and U17 experience, but to a lesser extent than Gaudreau having played behind him. Um, but on the other hand, Milic has been very, very good for the Seattle Thunderbirds. Now, obviously, this is a very strong team in the WHL, but there were games in which Milic saved 38 saves out of 39, for example, against Kamloops, and 35 out of 36 against the Portland Winterhawks, two very strong offensive teams. So he's not necessarily being carried by his team, but he has a 2.35 goals against average and a 919 save percentage in 14 games in the WHL. So between those two, it's really tight, but I think I'd give Goodrow the edge just based on the experience that he already has. And the fact that, he's been trusted already by Team Canada with the first string goaltending role. So that's it for our questions of the day from our mailbag. Now we're going to go into our third segment where we discuss some 2023 draft eligibles who have a chance to raise their stock after this tournament, right after these messages. All right. So to end off this episode, I wanted to discuss the 2023 NHL draft eligibles that are present at this tournament and which ones are most likely to rise their stock following the tournament itself. So I wanted to start by sort of breaking down the notable 2023s that are at this tournament, just in order based on which country they play for. So obviously for Team Canada, there's two of them. It's Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli. Then for Team USA, they've got three so far. Gavin Brindley, Ryan Reynolds, and Charlie Stramel. Sweden has Leo Carlson and Axel Sandin Palika, two probable first rounders. Team Finland has only one 2023 that didn't bring in Casper Halton, and it was Lenny Haminaho who gets the spot as the sole 2023 on the roster. And Slovakia has five of them. So they have Dalibor Dvorsky, of course. They have Alex Chernik, Maxim Sturbak, Martin Mishak, and František Day, who's a player I've been scouting a bit recently and been pretty impressed with. And then the other sort of notable one outside of the main five, I would say, would probably be David Reinbacher of the Austrian national team. So the players among this group that have the highest potential to rise in draft rankings after this tournament would probably be first and foremost Axel Sandin Palika. I think there's a very good chance that as a right-handed defender, he ends up being the first to get drafted, the first off the board in terms of defensemen. He's not talked about enough, honestly. He has a potential to be the best D out of this draft. He's fluid. He's offensively gifted. He's got great hands. Thinks the game extremely well. Now he does need some work on defense. There are some moments where he makes some shaky decisions, but he's getting more consistent with it, and that's the progress that's making him sort of rise up the rankings already. So I think this tournament, especially with the drought of right-handed defensemen that Sweden has, I think Axel Sandin Palika has a chance to work his way up to the first pair and then showcase his tremendous skills at this tournament. Now he has 5 points in 14 games in the SHL and 26 points in 20 games at the junior level in Sweden. So that's really great production for a draft year defender. But there's some limitations to his game that are sort of preventing him from being that first defender off the board. But I think that this tournament is a good opportunity for him to showcase that there's more to his game than meets the eye. And then moving on, the second player that I think would be the one to raise their draft stock the most would be Gavin Brindley, a right winger of the University of Michigan Wolverines in the NCAA. I've been watching some Michigan games recently, and when he slots into that top six, when a player gets injured, or when half the team got ill and he got an opportunity there, he was outstanding. I mean, I'm still looking for him to develop some delay to his game. I think that he doesn't really slow down the pace a lot. He loves to push the pace and speed things up and, burn defenders and he's got a lot of intensity, so that pairs well with his skating at this level, but it's important to be able to slow down the play and find passing lanes that way. I haven't seen that from him yet, but his intelligence really shines when he's passing the puck. His playmaking is tremendous. So I think that that intelligence is going to translate to a better delay game with time. That's something that's going to be able to develop eventually. But the thing with Brindley is right now he's not getting a lot of opportunities to showcase that skill. He's got a goal and 9 assists for 10 points in 20 games. I actually think that the shot selection is pretty good, but he's not getting a lot of shots because he's not getting a lot of ice time. For example, on the power play, he's playing sort of second string power play. He's playing with some teammates that aren't necessarily as smart as he is. So he tries to find them in soft ice with passes and stuff. It doesn't connect. And when he shoots, they're not necessarily screening the netminder or making it easier for him, but his selection of shots, the timing of his shots is really good. So on paper, it seems like a pure playmaker, but I actually like his shot a lot. So, you know, even then, to score 10 points in 20 games in the NCAA as an undersized draft eligible right winger, he's like 5'9", 170 pounds, and he's able to put up those points against 20 to 24-year-olds in the NCAA. That's really impressive. Then after Brindley, I'd say Lenny Haminaho is one guy who might be able to sort of put himself on the map as a first rounder potentially. He's the only 2023 on Finland's roster. He's been playing really well for Asset Pori in the Liga. He's got 13 points in 28 games. I think he's third or fourth on his team in scoring. And the only game I've watched of him, I came away impressed, very impressed with how good he is along the boards and how smart he is with the puck. And that combination is really interesting for me. He could do damage in this tournament. He might not necessarily sneak in the first round, but I think that he's got an opportunity to put himself in the map as a top 40 prospect. Then there's Martin Mishak, who I talked a bit about in the last episode, which will be linked at the end of this one. He's a center from Slovakia. He's playing in the first division of pro hockey, and in Slovakia, he's got 7 assists in 23 games. No goals so far, but he's relatively unknown. I don't see him discussed a lot in scouting circles, but I've loved what I've seen from him. He's really smart defensively. He's got good speed, good hands. I think he might impress a couple of people at this tournament if he makes the final roster. He'd be a decent for me, sort of second, third round option, based on what I've seen. Now, there's a lot of hockey left to watch, but that's sort of my assessment of him. And then finally, I wanted to discuss David Reinbacher, a right-handed defenseman of Team Austria. He's been playing in the Swiss National League. He's got 14 points in 28 games from the blue line for them. He's kind of flew under the radar. Now he did show up, I believe, in the top 10 or top 15 of a big name scouts rankings, and that's what kind of made me want to check out a couple of games. That and the fact that my colleagues at Dauber Prospects, that scout Europe, had glowing reviews of him. Great things to say about his game. So, I got interested at that point and decided to go and watch a game. And, he was dominating on both sides of the ice, but mainly defensively. His main thing was defending the rush, preventing chances of the opposing team, and cycling the puck the other way, making a smart breakout pass, that kind of thing. Now, I don't think he's got sort of top pair potential based on sort of limited, but not necessarily limited, just about average offensive output. But I think that he's got the potential to sort of become a top four defender, a second pairing, sort of number three and number four defender. And that places him square in my top 32. I think that he's going to be a first rounder as the January rankings come around. He's definitely earned it based on this play and based on what I've seen. And the thing about the Swiss National League is it's a league that pays really well. So it attracts a lot of North American players that don't necessarily want to play in the AHL or the ECHL because they don't pay enough. So they go overseas to the Swiss National League. So there's a lot of decent players playing in that league, and he's able to put up those results. So that's helping him a bit. I think he's just mature for his age in terms of his development. But it's going to be very interesting to see sort of how this tournament plays out, because now he's going to be comparing himself to players of his age group. He's not playing against men. He's not playing against adults. He's playing against 17 to 19-year-olds. So yeah, he's a great defensive defenseman in my opinion. He's got some transition upside, but I'm not sure how well he does in the offensive zone. But we'll see more clearly in this tournament what his offensive upside can be, because he's gonna be the main play driver, I think, for Team Austria on that blue line. So yeah, he's gonna have a lot of opportunities to showcase what he can do. But that's going to be it for today's episode. Thank you very much for listening all the way to the end. If you're watching on YouTube, please take a moment and like and subscribe. It's always much appreciated. Leave a comment, just sort of detailing what you liked about the episode, or what you would like to see next time. Always appreciate some feedback. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They're a great source for everything in terms of updates and news about last night's games. They keep you up to date on what's been going on in the sports world, so you can discuss it and with your friends, and keep your knowledge up. But this has been Locked On NHL Prospects with Hattie Kalakesh, and I hope you tune in next time.